A trash bag washed up on the shores of Deer Island. Inside was the body of a little girl. No name, no ID, no one looking.
Police reconstructed her face and shared it across the entire country. Over 50 million people saw it, but not a single one recognized her.
No missing persons report. No family came forward.
3 months later, an anonymous phone call changed everything. And for the first time, she had a name, Bella.
But a name was only the beginning. What came next shook the entire nation.
And to uncover the truth behind this case, we have to start where she was found.
On the morning of June 25, 2015, a woman named Colleen Fitzpatrick was walking her dog on Deer Island, a narrow strip of land off Boston Harbor, when she discovered a black trash bag near the shoreline. Inside was the decomposed body of a young girl, estimated to be between 2 and 4 years old. The child was wrapped in a fleece blanket and wearing white polka-dotted leggings. Fitzpatrick immediately called the police. Investigators arrived quickly. The medical examiner determined that the body had been in the water for an extended period. There were no obvious signs of trauma sufficient to establish a clear cause of death. Notably, there were no identifying documents or labels and nothing to indicate who the child was. The girl was initially referred to as Deer Island Jane Doe. The media later called her Baby Doe. The Boston Police Department, working with the FBI, launched a full-scale investigation. Using forensic reconstruction technology, they generated a digital facial image of the child, hoping someone would recognize her. That image was distributed widely across the country, on phones, billboards, television, and social media. Over 50 million people saw her face within weeks. No one recognized her. No missing persons reports matched. No relatives came forward, no neighbors called, no daycare, clinic, or welfare agency had a matching record. The fact that a child could die and remain unidentified in the digital age raised serious concerns. How could a young girl vanish, end up dead, and no one notice? Investigators expanded their efforts, cross-referencing interrupted child welfare benefits, reviewing surveillance footage from docks, and checking old case files from Child Protective Services in Massachusetts. Still, nothing came up. Baby Doe remained a nameless body. No one claimed her. No one reported her gone. For 3 months, media coverage persisted and public pressure mounted. Theories ranged from domestic abuse to accidental death to intentional abandonment. None could be confirmed. Baby Doe remained one of the most haunting mysteries Boston had seen in years. Nearly 3 months had passed since the unidentified child's body was found on Deer Island, and investigators still had no solid leads. Over 50 million people had seen the reconstructed image of Baby Doe, but no calls came in. No missing persons reports matched. No relatives came forward. No organization recognized the child. The case had stalled. On September 18, 2015, a breakthrough came when an anonymous caller phoned the tip line. The caller said they knew a woman named Rochelle Bond living in the Dorchester area of Boston and believed the child in the image looked like Rochelle's daughter, a girl named Bella Bond, around 2 or 3 years old, whom they hadn't seen in months. Investigators acted quickly. Records confirmed that Rochelle Bond, 40, had a history of drug-related offenses and public disturbances. She lived with her boyfriend, Michael Patrick McCarthy, 35, in a small apartment on Maxwell Street. She had a daughter named Bella Nevia Amoroso Bond, born in August 2012. There had been no missing persons report filed, no preschool registration, no recent medical records. Even the state's Department of Children and Families had not flagged anything suspicious, as Bella's welfare benefits had already been discontinued. That a child could disappear without setting off any alerts stunned investigators. On September 19th, police interviewed Rochelle Bond. She didn't deny having a daughter named Bella, but when asked where the child was, her demeanor changed. After several minutes of silence, she broke down in tears and told police that her daughter was dead and that her boyfriend, Michael McCarthy, was responsible. In her initial statement, Rochelle claimed that sometime in May 2015, McCarthy had approached Bella, stared at her, and said, "She's not a little girl anymore. There's something in her." He then struck Bella hard in the stomach. According to Rochelle, Bella collapsed and never moved again. When she tried to call for help, McCarthy stopped her. He threatened to kill her if she said anything. He placed Bella's body in a small freezer in the apartment. Days later, he removed the body, placed it in a trash bag weighted with stones, and drove to the harbor to dispose of it. Rochelle didn't go with him, but she said she knew what he had done. For the next 3 months, Rochelle told no one. She didn't call the police. She didn't speak to family. She continued living with McCarthy as if nothing had happened. When asked why, she simply said, "I was scared. I thought if I said anything, I'd die too." Her statement was passed to the medical examiner. DNA testing confirmed the match. The body found on Deer Island was Bella Nevaeh Amoroso Bond, 2.5 years old, victim. Michael McCarthy was arrested the same day, found hiding at another apartment. He denied all accusations, claiming it was Rochelle who had harmed the child. Both began blaming each other. While the full truth was still unclear, one thing was now certain. Baby Doe had a name. Her name was Bella Bond. And with that came a chilling question: how does a child go missing and no one goes looking? After the body found on Deer Island was identified as Bella Bond, Boston police shifted their focus to determining the cause of death and who was responsible. The first and only person to provide detailed information at that point was the victim's mother, Rochelle Bond. Rochelle claimed that after Bella died, Michael McCarthy wrapped her body in a blanket and placed it in a small freezer inside their apartment. In the days that followed, he continued to live as if nothing had happened. Rochelle said she was closely monitored, not allowed to use the phone, and not permitted to leave the apartment alone. McCarthy allegedly injected her with heroin regularly, leaving her in a weakened, subdued state. Several days later, she said McCarthy took Bella's body out of the freezer, placed it in a trash bag weighted with stones, and disposed of it near the harbor. Rochelle didn't go with him, but she knew what had happened. Police listened to her testimony with caution. Although Rochelle showed signs of emotional instability, her account remained generally consistent during early interviews. However, discrepancies began to appear. In one instance, she said Bella's body was kept in the freezer for 2 weeks. In another, she claimed it was only a few days. When asked why no one noticed any odor or suspicious activity in the apartment, she had no answer. The most troubling aspect was Rochelle's silence. She hadn't called the police, asked for help, or tried to escape. For 3 months, she continued receiving welfare payments, went shopping, saw friends, and was even seen at local community events. A detective wrote in his report, "If she was truly terrified, why didn't she leave? Why did she continue living as if nothing had happened?" This raised a new question for investigators. Was Rochelle truly a victim under control, or was she an active accomplice? From a legal perspective, prosecutors recognized that Rochelle Bond was their only viable witness against Michael McCarthy. There was no surveillance footage, no eyewitnesses. The body had decomposed after being submerged in seawater for months, leaving no clear forensic evidence of cause of death. Without Rochelle's testimony, the case against McCarthy would collapse. Facing this reality, the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office offered her a plea deal. Rochelle would plead guilty to being an accessory after the fact in exchange for her full cooperation and testimony against McCarthy at trial. The recommended sentence was 2 to 3 years in prison, with time already served counted toward the total. The public reacted with outrage. Many in Boston couldn't understand how a mother who concealed her daughter's death for 90 days and lived normally during that time could receive such a light sentence. News outlets criticized the plea as a cheap price for silence. Still, from a prosecutorial standpoint, it was a calculated decision. Without her, there would be no conviction. Given the lack of physical evidence, Rochelle's account, however flawed, was essential to hold McCarthy accountable. In court, Rochelle admitted to using heroin during the time of the incident, to hiding her daughter's death, and to never reporting it. In return, she agreed to testify fully before the jury and recount what she said she had witnessed. At this point, the Bella Bond case entered its trial phase. A mother stood before the public, acknowledging that she had failed to protect her child. A suspect denied everything and claimed he had been framed. And in the middle of it all was the body of a 2-year-old girl, wrapped in a blanket, discarded in a trash bag, thrown into the sea, like she had never existed. Before his arrest for second-degree murder in the death of Bella Bond, Michael Patrick McCarthy was already known to the Massachusetts justice system. He had prior arrests for drug possession, a documented history of heroin use and other narcotics, and lived on the fringes of society for much of his adult life. But in this case, what concerned investigators wasn't just his criminal record. It was his ideology, behavior, and mental state, particularly his obsession with fringe belief systems, conspiracy theories, and the idea that children could be possessed by demons. According to public records, McCarthy had previously lived with his mother in South Boston before moving in with Rochelle Bond. He was unemployed, living on public assistance and questionable income sources. Acquaintances described him as quiet, tense, and often engrossed in online content about cults and esoteric belief systems. One longtime acquaintance told police that McCarthy had spoken about hybrid beings, entities supposedly possessed by demons, often in the form of children. He once reportedly said, "Not all of them are really human. Some are born to destroy the order of mankind." On McCarthy's phone, investigators found extensive browsing history linked to conspiracy websites, particularly about Jade Helm 15, a real U.S. military training operation that conspiracy theorists believed was a government plan to control the population. He also had hundreds of saved screenshots of articles about the Illuminati, satanic cults, child sacrifices, and ritual abuse. In interviews, a former girlfriend claimed McCarthy believed he could sense cursed spirits hiding inside children's bodies. While no formal psychiatric diagnosis had been documented, the pattern of thought pointed to paranoid and delusional tendencies. In court testimony, Rochelle Bond said McCarthy grew increasingly erratic after moving in. He claimed Bella wasn't human and was possessed. She described moments when he would stare at the child for hours without blinking, whispering nonsense. At times, he allegedly muttered, "We have to do something before it's too late." She admitted to being terrified, but said she stayed because he threatened her constantly. One witness, Rochelle's ex-boyfriend, told police that months before Bella's death, McCarthy once half-joked, "If the kid disappears, no one's gonna care. We live in a world where kids like that don't belong." In pretrial discovery, prosecutors presented McCarthy's computer data showing searches such as, "Is my child possessed?" "Exorcism for toddlers?" "How to remove demons from children?" "What if I think my child is not human?" There was no direct evidence that McCarthy had premeditated a murder. The prosecution's case rested heavily on Rochelle's testimony and the circumstantial connection between McCarthy's behavior and Bella's death. McCarthy's defense argued that all of the demonic possession details were fabricated by Rochelle to shift blame away from herself. They suggested she may have caused Bella's death during a drug episode and created a false narrative to cover her own involvement. As for McCarthy, he remained mostly silent during his detention. In one brief exchange with an investigator, he reportedly said, "She's the one with the problems. I never touched that kid." When asked why he never reported Bella missing, his reply was cold and detached. "How would I know where she went? She's not my kid. "She's not mine." Throughout trial preparations, the prosecution maintained that McCarthy had motive, demonstrated erratic behavior, and held dangerous beliefs, enough to suggest that he was capable of killing a child he viewed as possessed, even without forensic evidence or eyewitnesses. The case didn't just center on who killed Bella Bond. It raised a more terrifying question. If someone truly believes a child is possessed by evil, do they see killing that child as a righteous act? Michael McCarthy wasn't just a suspect. He embodied a dangerous combination: delusion, extremism, and a complete emotional detachment from the value of a child's life. From the moment Rochelle Bond came forward as the only person offering information about Bella's death, public opinion was divided. One side saw her as a victim, abused, controlled, and paralyzed by fear and drugs. The other saw her as a willing accomplice, someone who knew exactly what happened, possibly even participated in it, and remained silent by choice. Technically, Rochelle was the first person to speak the truth. She gave Bella a name. She described in detail Michael McCarthy's belief that Bella was possessed, how he allegedly stored her body in a freezer and later disposed of it in the harbor. According to her, McCarthy kept her under control, injected her with heroin, and threatened to kill her if she told anyone. But once the full investigative record was made public, contradictions began to surface. First, Rochelle had a long history of drug abuse and had previously lost custody of 2 other children due to unsafe living conditions. Bella was her 3rd child, born under uncertain circumstances, and spent most of her life with just Rochelle and a rotating cast of boyfriends. Rochelle had been under supervision from Massachusetts child welfare agencies, but records showed that oversight had declined by 2014 to 2015. At one point, Bella was described as healthy and developing normally. However, there were no records of doctor visits or enrollment in any preschool programs. Second, during the 3 months following Bella's disappearance, Rochelle continued to live her life publicly. She went shopping, used food stamps, saw friends, and even posted on social media. Multiple witnesses said they asked her about Bella, and she casually responded, "She's staying with her dad." No one suspected anything, possibly because erratic behavior was expected from her. The most troubling detail was the timing of her confession. It didn't come out of guilt or desperation. It only came after an anonymous tipster called police. Without that tip on September 18th, 2015, Bella's death might have remained a mystery under the name Baby Doe. When confronted, Rochelle claimed she was scared for her life and had no way out. But investigators noted that given her frequent social contact, her continued silence was difficult to justify. One detective wrote in his report, "She wasn't locked in. She wasn't cut off from the world. She chose not to speak." There was also no definitive forensic evidence linking McCarthy to the fatal act. Bella's body, recovered after months in seawater, showed no clear signs of trauma. Rochelle's claim that McCarthy had struck the child could not be independently confirmed. With no witnesses, no physical evidence, and no surveillance footage, her testimony stood alone. And that testimony helped her secure a deal: 2 to 3 years in prison for accessory after the fact. Some in the legal community defended the decision. From a prosecution standpoint, it made sense. Without Rochelle, there would be no trial. But from a moral perspective, the idea of a mother walking free after concealing her daughter's death for 90 days was deeply unsettling. In her final testimony, Rochelle told the jury, "I didn't protect my daughter. I can't forgive myself." But for many, the words came too late and rang too hollow. The question remains: was Rochelle a battered woman, paralyzed by fear and addiction? Or was she a mother who chose silence, not out of fear, but out of guilt? From May to September 2015, Bella Bond, just 2.5 years old, disappeared from the world. No one filed a missing persons report. No one called the police. No Amber Alert was issued. In a nation of hundreds of millions, in a city as developed as Boston, no one asked the question, "Where's Bella?" This baffled investigators and became one of the most haunting aspects of the case. A child had died without a sound, and the world only noticed when her body washed ashore. As authorities reviewed agency records, a disturbing pattern of systemic failure emerged. Bella had previously been on the radar of Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, DCF. She had been monitored, received benefits, and was designated as a child in need of protection. But in early 2015, the Bond household's file went quiet. Scheduled check-ins stopped for unclear reasons. Public assistance was halted around April. No one confirmed whether Bella was still alive. What stood out most? No schools or healthcare providers raised red flags. Bella was not enrolled in preschool. She had no primary physician, no updated vaccination records. On paper, she was nearly invisible. Rochelle Bond would later claim she lived very privately and didn't trust the system. But this only underscored a darker truth. If a child isn't in the system, no one is obligated to protect them. Beyond institutions, the next question was community. Where were the neighbors, the relatives, the friends? During the investigation, police interviewed dozens of people who had interacted with Rochelle during the 3 months after Bella's disappearance. Several said they asked about the child, only to be told, "She's staying with her father." No one pressed further. Those who had once known Bella said they had lost contact with Rochelle due to her chaotic lifestyle. One relative who had cared for Bella early in life believed the child had simply been sent to live with her paternal family. There wasn't a single bystander in this story. There were dozens, all silent, all accepting vague answers, all quietly stepping away from Bella's life. For the media, this became a focal point for broader criticism of society. Editorials denounced the community's moral disengagement. Journalists asked, if a child can live in our city, be seen, known, named, and still die unnoticed, what does that say about us? A veteran reporter wrote, "Baby Doe isn't the first child to die without being missed, but she's the clearest proof that we can live side by side and still not see each other, even when a child vanishes." Following the case, Massachusetts' governor ordered a review of DCF oversight procedures. An independent report later confirmed multiple failures in monitoring Rochelle Bond's file. Still, no individual was held criminally responsible. The matter ended with recommendations for process improvements. But for Bella, no review could undo the outcome. For 3 full months, she lay in the ocean, nameless, unclaimed, and unfound. This wasn't just the death of a child. It was the death of vigilance, the death of visibility, the death of the basic human attention that a society should owe its most vulnerable. In June 2017, nearly 2 years after the unidentified body washed ashore on Deer Island and was confirmed to be Bella Bond, the case went to trial in Suffolk Superior Court. The defendant, Michael Patrick McCarthy, age 37, charged with second-degree murder. The prosecution's key witness, Rochelle Bond, the victim's mother and the only person who claimed to have witnessed the crime. From the outset, the atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. The 12 jurors faced a difficult truth. The entire case hinged on the testimony of a mother who had lied before, was addicted to drugs, and remained silent for 90 days after her daughter's death, yet now claimed to be telling the truth. McCarthy's defense attorney, Jonathan Shapiro, opened with a bold claim. "My client did not kill Bella Bond. Rochelle Bond did, and today she's standing here to lie to you one more time." The defense strategy was clear. Destroy the credibility of the prosecution's only eyewitness. They did not deny that Bella was dead, or that her body had been concealed. They acknowledged that McCarthy was in the apartment. But they insisted it was Rochelle, not McCarthy, who caused Bella's death, and then constructed a demonic possession story to shift the blame. Rochelle Bond took the stand for several days. She dressed modestly, her voice often low, occasionally cracking. She described life with McCarthy, his belief that Bella wasn't human, his threats, and the night he allegedly struck the child in the stomach. She admitted she didn't call for help, didn't report the death, and allowed the body to be discarded in the ocean. Prosecutor David Deacon asked, "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" She replied, "I was scared. I thought he would kill me. I thought I was next." But under cross-examination, defense attorney Shapiro didn't hold back. He pointed out inconsistencies in her timeline, whether Bella's body had been kept in the freezer for days or weeks, and her vague recollection of events. "Isn't it true that you could be lying right now?" Rochelle responded, "I've lied before, but I'm telling the truth now." The defense emphasized her addiction, past abuse toward her children, and her motive to fabricate a story. They argued that Bella may have died from an overdose, a tragic accident, or unknown cause. And Rochelle had used the opportunity to demonize McCarthy in exchange for a lighter sentence. This crime has no eyewitnesses but one, and that witness is a mother who let her daughter die and said nothing. The prosecution focused on McCarthy's disturbing behavior. They presented search history from his devices, showing repeated interest in topics like demon possession, toddler exorcism, and occult practices. Witnesses testified he believed Bella was not human. The prosecutors argued that McCarthy was paranoid, delusional, and dangerous enough to believe killing Bella was justified. Still, the case had a fatal flaw: no forensic proof of homicide. Bella's body showed no clear fatal injuries. The cause of death was officially undetermined. No weapon, no physical evidence, no blood, no DNA. Everything rested on Rochelle's testimony. After more than 3 weeks of testimony, the jury entered deliberation. They had to decide whether to believe a mother with a long history of deception or a man who denied everything. On June 26, 2017, Michael McCarthy was found guilty of second-degree murder. The court ruled that, despite the lack of direct evidence, the circumstantial factors, his behavior, beliefs, and demeanor, were enough to hold him accountable for Bella's death. The sentence: life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. Rochelle Bond, per her plea agreement, was sentenced to 2 years and released just months later, with time served credited. For the prosecution, it was a hard-earned conviction. For the public, it was a deeply unsatisfying outcome. Both central figures in the trial had lied. Both had remained silent while a child died. And only one would serve meaningful time. But the bigger question remained. Would the full truth of what happened the night Bella died ever be known? On June 27, 2015, the body of a young girl, estimated to be between 2 and 4 years old, was found wrapped in a nylon bag that had washed ashore on Deer Island, east of Boston. No documents, no identification, no one reported her missing. She was given a name that the entire country would later remember: Baby Doe. A reconstructed image of her face, with large eyes, fair skin, and brown hair, was broadcast across social media, television, gas stations, train stations, and highway billboards. The case shocked the public, not just because of its tragedy, but because of the profound loneliness of a child who died without a voice. When Baby Doe was eventually identified as Bella Bond, more than 2 months after her body was found, the public still couldn't stop asking, how could this happen? In September 2015, a funeral was held for Bella. Her mother wasn't there. McCarthy wasn't there. Only strangers attended: neighbors, social workers, investigators, and many residents of Boston who had never known Bella in life. Her first headstone bore no name, only the inscription, "Beloved Angel, forever in our hearts." Sometime later, once the case had closed, A community fund helped provide a new grave marker for Bella, this time with her full name, date of birth, and date of death. A small wooden plaque placed in front of the headstone read, "Bella Bond, may your light shine where darkness tried to hide you." But beyond the name and the grave, what lingered in society wasn't just grief, it was a deep sense of helplessness. A child could die, be discarded, drift for days in the ocean, and no one knew who she was. It forced people to confront how society treats its invisible children. Multiple internal reviews were launched by DCF, welfare organizations, the Department of Education, and public health systems. Most concluded with findings of administrative error or lack of coordination. No one was fired. No criminal accountability was assigned to those who missed the warning signs. Meanwhile, child protection groups across the U.S. began using Bella's case as a rallying cry. A nationwide campaign called No Child Unknown was launched, urging states to audit high-risk child records, improve missing child alert systems, and require schools and clinics to report unusual absences immediately. Public attitudes toward children in unstable households also began to shift. No longer was it acceptable to assume, "It's not my business." After Bella, every missing child, every strange bruise, every silence came with a new question. If I don't speak up, who will? At Winthrop Cemetery, where Bella is buried, visitors still come each week. They leave teddy bears, handwritten notes, white daisies, and messages like, "You are not alone anymore. I never knew you, but I think of you every day. You remind us that silence is also a crime." Though justice was served, public opinion on Rochelle Bond remains divided. Some see her as a failed mother who deserves punishment. Others view her as a victim caught in a cycle of abuse and addiction, a product of a fractured social system. As for McCarthy, few, if any, offer sympathy. He became a symbol of delusion, extremism, and chilling indifference. But beyond both of them, Bella Bond, once known only as Baby Doe, became a symbol of dangerous silence and a reminder that every child deserves to be known, to be heard, to be protected. Michael McCarthy now sits in prison, serving a life sentence, with more than enough time to reflect on the story the entire nation heard, though only he and Rochelle Bond know the full truth. And perhaps even they have never told it all. The case is closed, the court has ruled, but the gaps in the record remain unresolved. How did Bella Bond actually die? According to Rochelle's sole testimony, McCarthy believed the child was possessed and struck her in the stomach, killing her. But the medical examiner could not determine a definitive cause of death. No broken bones, no cranial trauma, no clear evidence of a fatal beating. Her body had decomposed too long in salt water to preserve conclusive physical clues. Could the real cause have been something else? A heroin overdose? Malnutrition? An accident? The truth was never verified through hard evidence. Why did Rochelle Bond stay silent? For 90 days, she said nothing. No police report, no call to family. She went to the store, used food stamps, lived life as if nothing had happened. She claimed McCarthy threatened her, that he forced her into heroin use, leaving her mentally and emotionally paralyzed. But when people asked, "Where's Bella?" she calmly replied, "She's with her father," again and again, without visible grief. Was she truly under coercion, or simply unwilling to face what she had allowed? Why did no one speak up? This remains the most haunting question of the case. A child disappeared. No one reported it. No one asked. No one suspected. Neighbors had seen Bella, friends had interacted with her, social workers had entered the home. But when she vanished, no one knocked. No one called. Not a single alarm was raised. Have we grown too used to overlooking the children of chaos? Have families like Rochelle Bond's, poor, addicted, marginalized, slipped so far from public concern that their children are simply unseen? And what truly made McCarthy believe a 2-year-old was demonic? At trial, evidence showed he was deeply superstitious, obsessed with conspiracy theories like Jade Helm, and believed the government used spiritual weapons to control minds. He once said Bella was not human, that something was inside her. Was he suffering from undiagnosed mental illness, or just a cold, dangerous man looking for a way to justify cruelty? No one will answer those questions now. There's no one left with a reason to tell the truth. Today, Bella's name is carved into her headstone, no longer Baby Doe, but her story still echoes in the silence she left behind. A child died, and no one searched. A mother stayed silent. A killer never confessed. And a society passed her by as if she had never existed. The case is closed, but the silence remains, deeper than any sentence ever handed down.